Hello and welcome back. This is Grillenheimer. Now, I'm not going to do a whole lot of discussion. I'm going to be pretty much reading from the Bible. We're going to be going to John chapter, let me just take these off. Chapter 19. We're going to start in verse 17 and go all the way to the end, from chapter 19, verse 17 through 42. And it's something we, as Christians, we read a lot. If you're non-Christian, you may not hear a lot of the biblical stories. But this is the heart of or part of it. This is the main part of it. We were starting right at the crucifixion. Here we go. They took Jesus, therefore, and he went out, bearing his own cross, to the place called the place of the skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 other men on either side, and Jesus in between. This is John's take on this. And Pilate wrote an inscription also and put it on the cross. And it was written, Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews. Therefore this inscription many of the Jews read, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city. And it was written in Hebrew, Latin, and in Greek. So Jesus the Nazarene, King of the Jews, was written in 3 different languages on signs around where he was being pretty much forced to affixate and die. And so the chief priests of the Jews were saying to Pilate, do not write the King of the Jews, but that he said, I am King of the Jews. Pilate answered, what I have written, I have written. He wasn't about to rewrite it. The soldiers, therefore, when they had crucified Jesus, took his outer garments and made 4 parts, a part to every soldier, and also the tunic. They were tearing up his clothes and going through it, kind of like if you remember that part in Scrooge. Now the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece. Now the outer garments they made into 4 parts, but the tunic was not. And they said therefore to one another, let us not tear it, but cast lots for it, to decide whose it shall be, that the scripture might be fulfilled. They didn't realize they were fulfilling scripture. Where it says, they divided my outer garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. Therefore the soldiers did these things, but there were standing by the cross of Jesus his mother and his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, which is John, he said to his mother, woman, behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, behold your mother. And from that hour the disciple took her into his own household. And from what we understand, John actually did continue to take care of Jesus' mother even after his death. After this, Jesus, knowing that all things had already been accomplished, in order that the scripture might be fulfilled, said, I am thirsty. Or in the Greek, it's like 2 words, I thirst. A jar full of sour wine was standing there, so they put a sponge full of the sour wine upon a branch of hyssop and brought it to his mouth. When Jesus therefore had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished." In the Greek, this is one word. And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. The Jews therefore, because it was the day of preparation, so that the body should not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for that Sabbath was a high day, asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. The soldiers therefore came, broke the legs of the first man and the other man, who was also crucified with Jesus. But coming to Jesus, when they saw he was already dead, they didn't break his legs. Again, the full prophecy is being fulfilled. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately there came out blood and water. And he who has seen has borne witness, and his witness is true. And he knows that he is telling the truth, so that you also may believe. For these things came to pass that the scripture might be fulfilled. Thus part of the scripture, not a bone on him shall be broken. I believe that's Exodus 12:46. And again, another scripture says, they shall look on him whom they pierced. That's from Zechariah 12:10. After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but a secret one, for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus, and Pilate granted permission. He came therefore and took away his body. And Nicodemus came also, who had first come to him by night, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds weight, which lets us know Nicodemus had money. And remember, Nicodemus came to Jesus in the middle of the night. If you remember my Nicodemus versus Jesus fight one or whatever, and I went through that section way back when. Gosh, that was about a year ago. So obviously through that talk and maybe some of the actions of Jesus since then, Nicodemus has turned and become a follower of Christ. And so they took the body of Jesus and bound it in linen wrappings with the spices, as is the burial custom of the Jews. Now in the place where he was crucified there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had yet been laid. Therefore, on account of the Jewish day of preparation, because the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. So, with that, I didn't have that prepared, but that is pretty much the crucifixion and the burial of Jesus Christ. And especially if you read all of chapter 19, it's hard to read. What they did to him is hard to read, whether you believe this stuff or not. Especially when they are whipping him with the cat o' nine tails. I mean, parts of his insides were showing. He was up on the cross. He was being asphyxiated pretty much. They did not have to break his legs in order to kill him. He was already dead. Verse 30, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. He let himself die. He knew when he was going to die, and he let it happen. There's other parts in the Bible that tells us other events that happened at the time of his death, not exactly described here by John, because John is focused on, this is why I believe. This is why you may believe, because these things happened. He was here witnessing this, and this is his word. Whether you believe this or not. So it's extremely descriptive. The timing is all right here. From the sign, or the signs actually, to the debate. Oh, you need to change this. And Pilate's like, I'm washing my hands. I'm not doing this again. The sign is what it is. Just leave it. And there's all sorts of prophecy. If you go back to, like I said, Zechariah, and even I think there's one out of Psalms. And there's at least a couple of prophecies in here that are being fulfilled before their very eyes. And a lot of this was not brought up, so to speak, or understood by the disciples until Christ was dead, was buried, and was resurrected, and then spent time with them before he ascended into heaven. So this is very serious, very heavy. It's why I didn't have a game on with this for this segment, which I really miss my original setup. So with that, read all of John chapter 19 as your homework. It's very good. It's very, like I said, hard to read, especially everything that happens prior to this. He was in extreme pain. It was hard for him to breathe. They know exactly where to get the nerve in the hand for the worst kind of pain, and that's why they didn't always nail their hands. Some they did, but with Jesus they got him in the feet and the hands. And that kind of pain, it's just shoots straight up to you. And when your feet are nailed as well, that's the only way you can try to get any reprieve to be able to breathe in that kind of position, is you're trying to lift up to try to breathe. And every time you lift up, it's just agonizing pain. It's terrible what these people went through. The crucifixion is like the worst kind of torture, death a person can go through. So with that, I wanted to follow up because I said I was going to do this. And that is the death and burial of Jesus. Next time, we're going to go on to something else. Think on these things. Read on these things. Pray on these things. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.